Crested Butte, Colorado, late summer 1885. Abigail Hawthorne stood at the top of the steps leading off the train, immediately assailed by competing scents. The fresh evergreen wind off the Rockies clashed with the mechanical steam odor of the train, both mingling with the smoky haze from the small town. Though it had only a few hundred residents, it supported 1,000 or more miners in the area. She adjusted the bustle of her dress and tucked the small pillow she'd been sitting on under her arm. Thankfully, her dress wasn't the full Victorian bustle-style common back east, which would have made the train ride unbearable. Looking down, she saw her 3 traveling companions staring back up at her. 2 of them stood out among the townsfolk. The first was a short, thin, balding man, impeccably dressed and wearing spectacles. Edmund Horace was a lawyer from Denver who had been her father's attorney for several years. It bothered Abby that he rarely smiled, and when he did, it sent shivers down her spine. Towering over him was the man they called the Swede. Jonas Swanson was a mountain of a man, almost 2 heads taller than Mr. Horace and about 3 times as broad. Abby wondered how he could find suspenders large enough to accommodate all those muscles. Besides his imposing physique, he was covered with bright blonde hair, from his long, unkempt mane to his full beard. He reminded her of a huge golden bear. The third man, though dressed like most in town, would stand out anywhere. She knew she'd recognize the way he walked and talked. A handsome man with black curly hair and a full beard, his big blue eyes and outgoing personality set him apart. Besides that, he was Abby's husband of 5 years, Thomas Hawthorne. "Stay close," warned her husband as he helped her down. "This is certainly no place for a lady," she thought to herself, fighting back bitter comments. She knew this was in his blood. It had been his life for more than a decade before he returned home. Looking into his eyes, she could see the excitement he tried to hide. It was a look that, a year ago, would have made her heart skip a beat, but now it was just a reminder of what she'd given up, like a moth drawn to a flame or Icarus to the sun. She silently sighed. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Horace interjected, "please remain very close to us. Unfortunately, up in these parts, an attractive woman is rarer than the gold and silver these men are seeking." "Thank you, Mr. Horace. Both my husband and Jonas are packing heat, and I know Jonas has his rifle nearby as well." "I feel quite protected," she replied. "Still, I'll be careful and stay close." Horace nodded and turned to Jonas. "Grab our things and I'll go find Buckman and his transport." The big man grunted and nodded. Jonas rarely spoke, but Abby believed it was because he didn't speak much English, though he seemed to understand it very well. Abby looked over at her husband, noticing his smile partially hidden by his beard. His eyes searched the town as if he were looking for something. "Do you really miss this?" she asked, her tone a mixture of curiosity and concern. His face showed surprise. "You're looking at this place like it's your long-lost lover." "Well, that's a bit dramatic," he admitted. "But yes, I missed it every now and then." "Planning on leaving again?" she replied, a hint of frustration in her voice. "Damn it, woman. Save your venom for someone else." "Yeah, I missed this, but I'm still here, ain't I? I'm still married to you and living on the ranch." "Listen, Abby," he sighed, "I know you're on edge about this trip. I ain't looking forward to facing him either." Abby took a deep breath to calm herself. She knew he was right. She'd been tense for the past 4 months since everything had started to unravel. Now, facing her ex-husband promised to be a nightmare. "I'm sorry, Thomas. You're right. This trip is upsetting. Things haven't been right since Sarah ran away last May. Now having to face Jeremiah again is bringing back a lot of bad memories." "You know this meeting has to happen," he said. "As for Sarah, well, I told you I didn't do what she accused me of. She's still angry about her father." "I'm sorry she ran away, though," Abby replied softly. "She never forgave us for getting married," Thomas said, his frustration resurfacing. "Back then, you were drinking pretty heavily," she reminded him. "Damn it, Abby. Not here. Not now," he snapped. Abby turned away and looked over the little mining town, forcing herself not to dwell on the past several months. She remembered better times when she had moved to the Colorado Territory with her father, Henry Thompson, at the age of 6. They left Pennsylvania a few months after her mother had died, arriving in Colorado several years after the Pikes Peak or Bust Gold Rush. Her father wasn't searching for gold. He was seeking riches of another kind. He purchased a ranch that was one of 3 covering a small valley on the southeast base of Pikes Peak. The valley had the potential to become valuable if the railroad ever went through. Their ranch was adjacent to the 2 others in the valley, the old Wilson Place and the Hawthorne Ranch. Old Man Wilson lived up to his name and seemed to have a bone to pick with just about everyone. The Hawthornes, on the other hand, were a blessing. With so few other children in the area, she was lucky to have 2 close friends in the Hawthorne brothers, Thomas and Jeremiah. She was the same age as Jeremiah, while Thomas was a couple of years older. The three grew up inseparable, and Abby smiled thinking back to the countless hours they spent playing together after finishing their chores. Even back then, the brothers were polar opposites. Jeremiah always had to be the lawman, while Thomas played the outlaw. She had always taken on the role of the damsel in distress or the princess. Funny how I was drawn to the one with wanderlust even then, she thought. They had only been on the ranch for a few years when the war broke out. It hadn't affected Colorado much, but it did impact the Hawthorns. Mr. Hawthorne left his wife and 2 young boys to fight when Thomas and Jeremiah were only 11. He was gone for 2 years, but when he returned, he was a changed man. Abby remembered him as loud and full of laughter before, but the man who came home was a crippled, broken version of himself. He had lost his right arm and was partially blind in his right eye. His spirit was diminished, and Abby could count on one hand the number of times she heard him laugh after his return. Her father had said he died in the war, but his body just hadn't lain down yet. His condition strained the family. Mrs. Hawthorne nursed him, but everyone knew she wasn't very interested in the ranch. Thomas and Jeremiah essentially ran it under their father's oversight. It was Abigail's dream to stay in the valley and raise a family, and that seemed to be Jeremiah's dream as well. Thomas, however, had other aspirations and wasn't interested in a life on the ranch. His outlaw personality and craving for adventure matched his vagabond spirit. She loved both Thomas and Jeremiah back then. Jeremiah had been her knight in shining armor, while Thomas had been the adventurous spirit who captured her heart. Like most dreams, reality crushed hers when, shortly after his 17th birthday, Thomas left to seek his fortune, searching for gold and silver in the Rockies. It broke her heart, but it made her choice easy. Jeremiah was her future. At the age of 16, she and Jeremiah were married. Their marriage started off rocky, especially when Jeremiah discovered that Abby wasn't a virgin. She had given herself to Thomas just before he left. It took time, but they worked through it, and the marriage began to improve. The only other rough patch during those first years came after she gave birth to Sarah. The birth had been difficult, but their daughter was healthy. Unfortunately, Abby was never able to carry another child, which broke her heart. Yet Jeremiah was her rock during the time. His love and attention helped her heal, and her love for him grew. Around the time, Henry Thompson had been busy as well. A small village at the mouth of the valley sprang up. It wasn't large, only about 50 people lived there, but it had the basics of a town. A general store, a church, a smithy, and a boarding house with a tiny saloon attached. Abby was aware that her father owned a stake in nearly all of them. Unsurprisingly, it was called Thompsonville. She and Jeremiah had been married just over 6 years when Mr. Hawthorne quietly passed away. Mrs. Hawthorne decided to go to San Francisco to stay with her sister. Jeremiah told Abby that his father had left the ranch to him and Thomas with a provision that they care for their mother. A year later, in 1877, the Denver and Rio Grande Railway and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway went to war over access rights. The most notable incident was a major standoff when Bat Masterson and his men from Dodge City, hired by the ATSF Railway, took over the roundhouse in Pueblo. A man from the DRG Railway ended up bribing them to leave. During those years, there were rumors of homesteads being burned and people being run off their land. The valley was tense with fear, and that was when her father brought the Swede onto the ranch. Despite the Swede's presence, the railway war touched the valley. The Wilson Ranch burned one night, just a couple of months after Old Man Wilson's grandson and his new wife had arrived to help on the ranch. Old Man Wilson perished in the fire, and his grandson was badly burned. Not a week later, the grandson and his wife left, but not before selling the ranch to Henry Thompson. Her father explained that they did it because the grandson couldn't rebuild. Jeremiah had always questioned the particulars of those events, and the relationship between her father and husband soured dramatically, putting a huge strain on her marriage. Abby felt like she was constantly defending her father to Jeremiah. As the railway wars continued, Abby's marriage began to slowly fall apart. They argued more frequently, and there were fewer nights when they didn't go to bed angry at each other. Gone were the nights filled with warmth and affection. The connection they once had seemed to be slipping away. She missed his strong arms around her at night and his soothing voice reassuring her that everything would be all right. They both felt like they had failed each other. She had stubbornly rebuffed most of his advances, and he had given in to his frustration and anger instead. Sometime later, Jeremiah told her he needed to check on something and would be gone for several days. When she questioned him, he was vague, saying he just wanted to be sure of something. He left, and 2 days later came the nightmare at the Hawthorne Ranch. It was 2 months before Abby was able to confront Jeremiah. With a deep sigh, she closed her eyes and remembered one of the worst days of her life. Thompsonville, Colorado, spring 1880. Jeremiah rode wearily up to the ranch house, knowing something was wrong. The last 2 months had been frustrating. First, he had gone to Leadville to check on his father's investment, finding it safe. Then he had gone to Denver to check when Henry Thompson had actually put a claim on the Wilson Ranch. Something didn't seem right. The dates he had told Abby didn't match up with how events unfolded. He had stopped by the law office Henry had used and asked some questions. They told him that he needed to speak with Mr. Horace, who would be back in a couple of hours. He went into a saloon just across the street to wait. Not 30 minutes later, a man accused him of insulting his family and hit him. Moments later, both he and the man found themselves in the Denver City Jail. He was tried and convicted despite claiming he had never seen the man before that day. 30 days later, he was given another 30 days for unknown reasons. After his release, he stopped by the law office again but was told Mr. Horace was out of town. He was also informed that the documents he was looking for were missing, and the man suggested that Mr. Horace may have them. Things felt strange when he returned to Thompsonville. He had stopped at the small saloon and found that Pedro and Maria Mendez were gone. The new owner served him and then abruptly let him know he wasn't welcome anymore. Surprised and annoyed, Jeremiah left and headed home. Upon arriving at the ranch, he found a welcoming party waiting for him. Abby was there with her father alongside the Swede and a small, well-dressed man. To his surprise, Jeremiah noticed that Thomas was with them as well. "Tom," Jeremiah said, smiling. "When did you come back?" "About 6 weeks ago," Thomas said coldly. Jeremiah was taken aback by his brother's reaction but quickly focused on his wife. He strode up to her, reaching out to take her in his arms, but instead felt her hand slap across his face. "Scumsucker!" Abby screamed. "How could you do this to me? What in blazes are you talking about?" "Maria Mendez, don't you play dumb with me." "I'm not playing dumb. I don't know what you're talking about." Maria said she was with child. "Oh God," Jeremiah snorted. "Whoever the father is had better run before Pedro gets a hold of him." "She said it was you, you scumsucker," Abby replied in shock. "What?" "You're right," Henry interjected. "Pedro wasn't happy and came after you." "Pedro never talked to me," Jeremiah stated. "This isn't funny, y'all." "No, it's not, son," Henry said in a patronizing voice. "Don't you ever call me that, you hear? I ain't your boy and I never touched Maria." "Abby, you've got to believe me," he insisted. "She said you did and then you shot her," Henry replied. "What?" Jeremiah stammered. "Pedro is dead?" "No," Henry said. "You just wounded him in the arm." "I never shot Pedro and I sure as hell never slept with Maria." "That's not what they say," Henry continued. "And that's not what they told the Colorado Springs sheriff." "That's a lie. Where are they? I'll get to the bottom of this." "They're already gone," Abby yelled, tears filling her eyes. "Yes," Henry said calmly. "They left shortly after they talked to the sheriff. I believe they were headed to Santa Fe or further south." "What, they just up and left their boarding house and saloon?" "No, I bought it off them so they'd have money to start over somewhere else." "This stinks, Henry. It smells like someone's trying to frame me." Jeremiah turned to his wife. "Abby, you can't believe." Jeremiah's heart froze as he saw her in Thomas's arms, being consoled. The look on his face shifted from anger to great sadness. "No," he groaned. "Abby, please tell me you didn't." "Thomas, why are you holding my wife?" "She was hurting, Jeremiah." "After what you did, I didn't do anything," Jeremiah retorted flatly, anger rising again. "So you came back just in time to swoop in and take my place? Is that what you're telling me, dear brother?" "How long have you been?" Thomas said nothing, holding Abby tighter. "You son of a," Jeremiah growled, starting toward Thomas. Unfortunately, he was so focused on the couple that he didn't see the giant shadow moving toward him. The Swede hit him once, but it was more than enough to knock Jeremiah out. When he came to, he was lying on the floor inside. He struggled to stand and leaned against the wall for support. In front of him sat Henry and the smaller, well-dressed man. Beside them stood the Swede, and behind them were Abby and Thomas. "Where's Sarah?" he croaked. "She's back at my ranch," Henry said calmly. "We didn't think she needed to see this travesty." "Are you ashamed of yourself, Henry?" "You should be." "I'm sorry, Jeremiah, but that sounds mighty hypocritical coming from a man who impregnated a girl and then shot her father." "I didn't do those things." "They said you did," Henry replied. Jeremiah searched the room for anyone who would believe him but found none. "Regardless of your denials," Henry continued, "there are some things you need to know. The sheriff in Colorado Springs has created a warrant for your arrest. Mr. Horace and I have convinced him not to issue it yet." "Mr. Horace?" "Yes, Mr. Horace is my attorney from Denver." I've mentioned him before. He's the one I was looking for in Denver. They said you had the documents I was searching for. Henry's land acquisition on Old Man Wilson's ranch. Why were you looking for that? Henry inquired. Because the date you said Wilson's grandson sold it to you doesn't match up with when it was supposedly written. If my calculations are right, those documents were written before Old Man Wilson died in that fire. That would mean you were lying about what you know about that. That's absurd, Henry huffed. I didn't have anything to do with that. Mr. Hawthorne, I can assure you that you were mistaken, Mr. Horace added. So where are those documents? Your office said you have them. They were wrong as well. I don't have them. This is all hogwash, Henry interjected, just the attempts of a guilty man trying to smear others to lessen the severity of his own actions. Boy, you need to know that I'm the only thing preventing that warrant from being issued. Now, unless you want to be an outlaw, I suggest you listen closely. Mr. Horace has some papers for you to sign that will turn over your portion of this ranch to Thomas. In return, that warrant will never be issued. Your wife and daughter will be taken care of for the rest of their lives. My wife is a cheater, and she's being taken care of by my backstabbing brother. Abby gasped and clung onto Thomas. Jeremiah took a step toward the couple, but the Swede stepped in front of him. You sit. Don't make me hurt you anymore, the giant growled. Jeremiah looked into the faces of his accusers and realized he had lost. Spending time in the Colorado Springs jail would be futile. Henry would find witnesses to lie against him, and Thomas would still end up getting his share of the ranch. Thankfully, his father had foreseen possible problems surrounding the ranch. It was a small victory considering what Jeremiah had lost. There was nothing left to do but retreat. He agreed to their terms and asked to say goodbye to Sarah before he left, but they refused. She'd been told that he ran off a month ago. Jeremiah Hawthorne left the valley that day a defeated man. Crested Butte, Colorado, late summer 1885. Abby, remembering that terrible day, wiped a small tear from her eye. Jeremiah had seemed so sincere in denying his actions, but the evidence against him showed otherwise. She had struggled with her actions during that time, questioning whether she had given up on their marriage too soon. What if Jeremiah was telling the truth? Had he not left, then she might have been the one at fault. Abby had been emotionally devastated after their meeting with Maria. Those first few days had been filled with overwhelming grief. 2 weeks later, when Thomas returned, she found herself seeking comfort in him, despite knowing she shouldn't. His presence provided solace amidst the turmoil that engulfed her life. It was 2 weeks after his arrival that he sought her out, and soon they were sharing a bed. When Jeremiah had confronted her, it became evident that she had moved on, that she was now with Thomas. 3 months after that confrontation, she and Thomas had grown closer. Meanwhile, Sarah was distraught, struggling to comprehend how her father could be accused of such things. At only 10 years old, she had been too young and naive to understand, and even now, as she matured, she questioned her own choices. Why hadn't she stood by Jeremiah? Why had she chosen her father and Thomas over her husband? These questions haunted her for years, and she still sought answers, with only Sarah's struggles offering some clarity. The following years had been relatively quiet, though her marriage to Thomas presented its challenges. He had grown increasingly emotionally distant since the death of his mother 3 years prior, brushing aside his feelings rather than confronting them. Abby had hoped he would show more sensitivity, given that he hadn't seen his mother in over 15 years. But as Thomas continued to conceal his emotions, she felt a growing distance between them. Compounding this was a nagging suspicion that Thomas might be unfaithful, particularly during his monthly trips to Colorado Springs. Despite confronting him multiple times, he always denied any wrongdoing, leaving her without proof. His restlessness began to surface more frequently, and she noticed his resentment towards their life on the ranch, compounded by an increase in his drinking. Then, 4 months ago, everything came to a head. Sarah had long held resentment towards Thomas for trying to fill her father's role. Her anger had festered over time, leading to numerous clashes between them. Thomas had threatened to discipline her, a claim Sarah vehemently denied. Caught in the middle, Abby felt torn. She didn't know whether to believe her daughter or her husband. Had Thomas crossed a line, or was Sarah reacting out of resentment toward the man she blamed for her father's absence? Then Henry intervened, chastising Sarah for stirring trouble during their negotiations with the railway. He felt that while Thomas's methods were questionable, Sarah had misinterpreted his actions. Crushed, Sarah retreated to her room, and Abby tried to console her, but Sarah rejected her comfort, feeling betrayed by her mother's loyalty to Thomas. Her father deeply regretted allowing Sarah to be alone, and 2 weeks later, Sarah ran away. They searched for her for days, even receiving reports that she had been seen in Colorado Springs. But after that, they lost track of her. Abby wept for days as Thomas tried to console her. Even now, Abby sometimes cried herself to sleep at night, thinking of her daughter. Thankfully, 2 months ago, they received news that Sarah was alive and well in Leadville. It was a surprise to find her, as the man who discovered her hadn't been looking for her at all. He had actually been searching for Jeremiah. Several months earlier, Henry had uncovered that Thomas didn't own a controlling interest in the Hawthorne Ranch. It turned out that Mr. Hawthorne had used 51% of the ranch to secure a loan to purchase a small business in Leadville. The profits from that business had supported Mrs. Hawthorne after he passed away. When she died, the business and its stake had gone to Jeremiah, who now owned the controlling interest in the ranch. Henry hired someone to track down Jeremiah, and the search accidentally uncovered Sarah, who was living and working as a handmaid for a wealthy widow named Wilcox in Leadville. A few weeks later, Jeremiah was found near Ashcroft. Now, Abby and her party were heading there to persuade Jeremiah to sell or sign over all or part of his claim to the ranch. Abby felt a sense of dread. "This is a bad idea," she said flatly. "What?" Thomas replied, surprised. "I said this is a very bad idea." "We don't have much of a choice," Mr. Horace added. "We need to do everything possible to convince your ex-husband to sign over at least a small portion of your ranch. The deal your father is working on with the railway requires full access through the valley." "I realize that, Mr. Horace, but I don't know how we can do that if Jeremiah still believes we've cheated him and that he was framed. There's little we can offer him." "Not true," Horace countered. "Besides the fair amount of money I'm carrying, we have several other incentives. Surely you don't think an apology from Thomas or me will persuade him?" "No, not by itself," Horace explained. "However, that, together with a good amount of money and possibly portions of the deeds to some of the businesses in Thompsonville, should help ease the hostility. We can also offer to make that old warrant for his arrest go away for good. Additionally, we can provide information on Sarah's location so he'll be able to reunite with her. I believe that will help seal the deal." "I'm not so sure, Mr. Horace," Abby thought to herself, remembering the pain and betrayal etched on Jeremiah's face that day, a look that had haunted her for years. It screamed of his innocence amid the evidence of his guilt. Despite their troubled marriage, she had loved Jeremiah. His absence had left her feeling lost and alone. When Thomas returned, she had sought refuge in his arms, grateful for his support during her lowest moments. Suddenly, Abby was jolted from her thoughts by a loud voice approaching. A rotund man with a huge smile came into view. "Yes, sir? We'll get y'all up to Ashcroft in a jiffy," he announced, stopping in front of the group. "So y'all ready? We'll be on our way shortly. The trip will be a little slow and some parts are pretty rough, but we should get you up to Ashcroft sometime this afternoon. We'll be going through Pearl Pass. Real pretty, but a bit rough." Abby had just met Mr. Buckman. He continued talking as they walked over to his stagecoach, and his chatter continued as they loaded their things. It wasn't until they were leaving Crested Butte that he finally seemed to take a breath. "I'm kind of surprised y'all didn't take the stage out of Aspen. There used to be a couple of stages daily out of Ashcroft about a year ago. But that's the nature of the beast, ain't it?" "What do you mean?" Horace asked. "There's got to be hundreds of little boom towns like Ashcroft spread out all over these mountains," Buckman replied with a laugh. "Someone discovers gold or silver and everyone comes running. Of course, a town pops up overnight until the gold runs out, and then everyone chases the next rumor of a strike. That's what happened to Ashcroft about 5 years ago. A couple of prospectors made a big silver strike and word got out. The rush was on, and within a couple of years, a town sprang up that eventually had over 3,000 residents. Hell, the place had over 20 saloons, 2 newspapers, and even a school. Tabor's wife tried to make it a respectable town a couple of years ago when she held a big event for some distinguished guests. They'd never seen that many high-profile people in these parts, but nothing could save the town when the silver ran out. It didn't take long before Ashcroft began looking like a ghost town. Nowadays, I only make a couple of runs a month up to Ashcroft. Most every month, the hunting parties from Leadville or Denver hire me to take them up there." "A hunting party?" Thomas asked. "Yep, they always head up to the Jenkins place. Sometimes it's John Jenkins himself. Other times, it's a friend of his named Ambrose from Denver. He's a bit rough around the edges, if you ask me. When that Ambrose fella is around, he always brings this big guy with him. He's not as big as you," Buckman said, looking over at the Swede, "but he's a decent size." "Is this hunting party up there now?" Thomas inquired. "Yep," Buckman replied, grinning. "Took them up 5 days ago. Ambrose, the big fella, and that skinny lad." "Skinny lad?" Horace asked. "Yeah, a teenage boy who looks a bit sickly, if you know what I mean. Never talks, but he always comes with both parties. I think they're trying to toughen him up by taking him out hunting and fishing. Although, if you want my opinion, it doesn't seem to be working." Buckman laughed heartily at his own joke. "Mr. Buckman," Abby asked cautiously, "do you know a man named Jeremiah Hawthorne?" "Can't say that I do, ma'am. But there's a man at the Jenkins place named Jeremiah. He's the guide for those parties. I haven't heard the name Hawthorne, but it could be him. I reckon you could ask old Zeb when we get to Ashcroft. His daughter and granddaughter live at the Jenkins place, so they'd know for sure." "They live there?" "Yep. Desiree, that's Zeb's daughter, used to help him run the hotel. She's a real beauty, tall and strong, but tough as nails. Anyway, she got pregnant and her husband died, or vice versa. I don't really know which came first, and I sure as blazes ain't going to ask her or old Zeb. Either of them would probably bite my head off. So, John Jenkins built this nice house for his wife, and she up and left for Leadville. Jenkins then brought Desiree out to the place to be the housekeeper. Now, I ain't saying anything was going on between Jenkins and Desiree, but she really is something." Over the rest of the trip, Buckman gave them a tour of the scenic landscape. Abby chuckled to herself when he began spouting facts that she knew weren't exactly accurate. He was quite the entertainer. As they rode into Ashcroft, Abby could see why Buckman referred to it as a ghost town. There were makeshift frames for tents and shabby buildings, but a few stood out as well-built. Two in particular drew her attention, a two-story building called the Hotel View and a saloon named the Blue Mirror Saloon. What was noticeably missing were the people. Only a few could be seen walking in the streets. Buckman pulled up his stage in front of the Hotel View. Getting down, he looked at the hotel and then over at the few remaining saloons. "Zeb," Buckman bellowed. "Got guests for you." Three older men stepped out of one of the saloons. "Figured you'd be at the Blue Mirror," Buckman laughed. One of the men began walking over to them. He was shorter, with a grizzled beard and matching hair. His big smile revealed several missing teeth. "Evenin', folks," he said in a thick Cajun accent. "Welcome to the Hotel View. If you get your stuff and follow me, we'll get y'all fixed up. These folks," Buckman continued, "will need someone to take them up to." "Mr. Buckman," Horace interrupted, "thank you for your assistance. We'll take it from here." "No skin off my back," Buckman said, smiling. "Just send word when you're ready to go. I'll be back up here the day after tomorrow to pick up that hunting party, but I can come back another day if you need." "No, sir," Horace stated. "The day after tomorrow should be fine." Abby and her party went up to their rooms and then came back down to meet on the porch. She noticed that a mule team was already hitched to a buckboard wagon waiting for them. Horace mentioned he had already told Zeb what they needed and that he would take them the 2 miles to their destination. The Jenkins place was located south, close to Taylor's Peak. It only took a few minutes after they left Ashcroft before Horace asked Zeb a pointed question. "Mr. Zeb will do just fine." "Okay, Zeb. You didn't seem that surprised when I asked you to take us to the Jenkins place." "Nah," the old man said, smiling back. "About a month ago, a stranger came to town asking questions about Jeremiah. It wasn't too hard to figure there was something unusual going on. If it had been a year or 2 ago, nobody would have noticed. But with everyone leaving, a person asking questions about one of the few who were staying caught attention." "How many are left in Ashcroft?" Thomas interjected. "About 100, give or take," Zeb replied. "A couple of years ago, there were well over 3,500. But then the silver dried up and they had a big strike up near Aspen. Most left before winter. Now there's only a handful left in town, a few dozen more mining around here." "Mr. Buckman said you had a daughter and granddaughter living at the Jenkins place," Abby said gently. "Buckman talks too much," Zeb snorted. "Hope you didn't tell him anything you didn't want everyone within 20 miles to know by morning." He slowly shook his head and looked over his shoulder at Abby. "Yes, ma'am. My granddaughter's name is Monique, but we call her Lilo. She and her mom have been at the Jenkins place for the past 4 years. She used to help me at the hotel until she became pregnant. Mr. Jenkins was kind enough to let her board and kept up his new house. Now she and Jeremiah take care of the place when Mr. Jenkins is gone, which is most of the time since Mrs. Jenkins never liked it here. She preferred her big house back in Leadville." "Don't you fear for their safety?" Abby asked. "I guess some, but it's no more dangerous there than anywhere else in the territories. Probably even safer than back home since the war. Desiree can handle herself pretty well. Besides, Jeremiah is still there. He's a bit of a softy, but he's loyal as a hound. They had a couple of other hands, but they left for Aspen last fall. Of course, then there are those dogs." "Dogs?" Thomas replied. "Yeah, a few years back, Mr. Jenkins ran across 3 abandoned pups. Turns out they were part wolf. Skittish as hell, but they made great guard dogs. Jenkins had 2 older dogs that adopted them. Now they run like a pack and are very territorial and protective. What surprised everyone was how quickly they took to my Desiree and little Emo. A couple of prospectors walked up to the house unannounced one night 2 years ago. The dogs attacked one and injured the other. Abby gasped in horror while the other 3 men listened intently. So, no ma'am, I ain't particularly worried. No more than any man worries about his family. Will we be safe? Horace questioned. Should be. It's daylight and I've been up to the place so many times that they'll recognize me. I'll ring the bell to make sure Desiree puts the dogs up though. Will Jeremiah be there? Abby asked gently. Doubt it. He's probably taken the Ambrose party out hunting or fishing. They usually stay a night or 2, then come back to the house depending on what they catch. As they approached a clearing, they saw a bell mounted on a post. Zeb got off the wagon and went over to ring it. He had barely gotten back up on the wagon when they heard dogs barking and a woman's voice shouting commands. Moments later, another bell was rung twice. Zeb guided the wagon across the clearing, and as they crested the hill, they saw a large 2-story house with a small bunkhouse and barn behind it. That'll be the Jenkins place, Zeb announced. Zeb tied off the team of mules. Before he could say anything to his passengers, a high-pitched squeal broke the air. Papy, a dark-haired little girl yelled as she ran toward them. Zeb laughed as he picked her up and she squealed again. This here is Lilo, he said, smiling. She ain't very tall, but we keep hoping. Speaking of your mama, Zeb said, smiling, where's she? Right here, replied a smiling young woman standing on the porch waiting on your old hide to bring that bag of curls back to the house. She was tall, almost 6 feet, and quite beautiful, though oddly dressed. Her long black curls were tied up in a simple ponytail and she wore a simple dress with a pair of breeches underneath, the front of the dress tucked in. Her gentle smile faded as she looked at Abby and her party. Can I help y'all? We're here to see Jeremiah Hawthorne, Horace stated. Is he here? And who be asking, she said. My name is Edmund Horace and we have a business proposition for him. And it takes 4 of you to ask, she replied, carefully eyeing the group. No, ma'am, Horace continued. This is Mr. Hawthorne's brother and ex-wife. They're here to talk to Jeremiah and heal some old wounds. Mr. Swanson is here for our protection since I'm carrying a good bit of money with me. Desiree nodded. Fair enough. I'll send Robbie to go fetch him. A tall, gangly man in his 20s came running up. It was obvious that he was somewhat slow. One eye was slightly cockeyed and he carried one arm oddly. He had a perpetual smile on his face that was contagious. Yes, Miss Ray. Go fetch Jeremiah. He took the hunting party up to Taylor Pass. Yes, ma'am, Robbie said, grinning. And make sure they hear you coming. Don't want them to shoot you by mistake. He left quickly and the others could hear him laughing as he ran. I expected them back tomorrow, but if Robbie finds them quickly, they should be back in a couple of hours. Y'all are welcome to wait inside, but those guns need to be left at the door. There's a chest just inside where you can put them and they'll be safe. Don't bring any firearms into the house or I'll turn the dogs loose on you. Everyone nodded and followed her into the house. Desiree watched closely as Thomas and the others put their sidearms into the chest. As Abby entered the house, she was immediately taken aback. The house was large and fancy, but the furnishings were ordinary and practical. It looked more like a hunting lodge than a home. I've got some salt pork and biscuits I can warm up if y'all are hungry, Desiree stated flatly, clearly hoping no one would take her up on her offer. And gravy? Zeb asked, ignoring her tone. Gravy? Lilo squealed. Desiree shot her father a disapproving look. All right, Papy, you take them to the sitting room. I'll go get it started. That jug's still hiding behind the rocker? Zeb grinned. Desiree huffed and turned to go back to the kitchen. May I help? Abby asked softly. I don't need any help, Desiree replied. I want to help. Lilo yelled out, struggling to get out of her grandfather's arms. Desiree sighed, looking at her daughter. All right, I guess I do need the help. While the men settled in the sitting room with a large jug of moonshine, Abby followed Desiree and her daughter back to the kitchen. As Lilo played with a small spoon and pot, Abby broached the awkward silence. She's beautiful, Abby said, staring at the little girl. She's a handful, Desiree responded, not looking up from her work. Is Jeremiah her father? Abby asked softly. Desiree stopped what she was doing and stared at Abby. No, Mo's daddy died before she was born. He worked in one of Mr. Jenkins' mines. The fever took him 2 weeks before I knew I was pregnant. I was helping Papy at the hotel back then. Then Mr. Jenkins built this fine house and hired me to work here. I think he did it out of charity, but I was still grateful. That's when I really got to know Jeremiah. I'd seen him around Ashcroft several times before. He followed Mr. Jenkins out here from Leadville and worked a while in the mines. One day, Jeremiah overheard one of the bookkeepers tell Mr. Jenkins something that didn't sound right. Jeremiah approached Mr. Jenkins later and told him his concerns. It turned out the bookkeeper was skimming some of the profits. Yes, Jeremiah was always good with numbers and book learning, Abby agreed. Well, Mr. Jenkins was impressed and moved him out of the mines and put him out here. I think so he'd look after me, but also so he could begin overseeing the books from each mine. The things Jeremiah didn't understand, he'd ask one of the other mine bookkeepers. He's done really well these past few years. Desiree looked at Abby and paused as if trying to determine whether she should continue. Abby stared back, about to ask a personal question. Are you? Abby began, hesitating. I mean, are me and Jeremiah a pair? Desiree replied with a smirk. Not for a while now. Up until a couple of years back, we were. Jeremiah helped me when I got so big with MO that I could barely do the chores around here. He talked to me at night when I was lonely and looked after me after Emma was born. He cared for both of us. He was so wounded when I first met him. Not on the outside, but inside. We helped each other, I think, but we weren't lovers until a couple of months after Emma was born. There was something between us right from the beginning. We weren't making moon eyes at each other, but there was a kind of love. He's a good man, but we weren't planning to spend our lives together. Still, I spent many nights in his bed and I doubt he had any complaints. Then Mrs. Tabor's big party happened and things changed a couple of months after that. What happened then? Abby asked softly. Why did things change? Jeremiah met someone. Well, she stammered. Who? Abby immediately knew she'd gone too far. Desiree's eyes flashed and her body tensed. The look on her face turned cold and dangerous. What's it to you? She snapped. You threw him out like he was nothing. I didn't, Abby started. Don't lie to me, Desiree growled. I know who you are. When I first met him, he was like a man going through each day praying it would be his last. It wasn't until Emma was born that I began to see life in his eyes again. So don't pretend you care about him. I know what you and those scumps sitting in there did to him, and it almost killed him. What I did? Abby retorted loudly, her own anger building. What about what he did to me? And what did he do to you? He cheated on me and got the girl pregnant. Says who? Says the girl he was cheating with. And if she wasn't telling the truth, why would she lie? I don't know. Why would she lie? What possible reason would she have to do that? She wouldn't, Abigail yelled. Jeremiah was wrong, Desiree sneered. You're not blind. You're dumb as a stump. Hey! Zeb yelled from the sitting room. Y'all need any help in there? Come into my kitchen, old man, Desiree yelled back, and you'll get a skillet upside your head. Desiree looked over at her daughter, whose eyes were as big as saucers. Baby, go crawl in your pappy's lap and ask him if he's going to hell because he drinks so much, like Preacher Man says. Okay, Mama, she said, dropping her things and running into the sitting room. A few seconds later, Zeb called out, That ain't right, Ray. No, it wasn't, she called back, so stay out of it. Turning back to face Abby, she forced a smile that made Abby's skin crawl. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, you were going to tell me why you'd believe this woman instead of your husband. No way. You didn't even give him a chance to defend himself, did you? He disappeared for 2 months. Did you even go looking for him? Did you just go climb into bed with his brother that night? That's not how it happened. Well, you better get your story straight and have a good explanation for Jeremiah when he gets back. 'Cause if you don't, he'll throw you off this property regardless of how big that Viking is in there. Abby took a deep breath and swallowed, following her response. They needed to keep their talk with Jeremiah as calm as possible. If this was what was in store for them, then their confrontation with Jeremiah was going to be ugly. Abby worked in silence alongside Desiree as they prepared and served a makeshift meal. A few hours later, just before sundown, they heard the dogs announcing someone's arrival. Moments later, they heard hushed voices outside. Abby realized Desiree had slipped out and was probably talking to Jeremiah before he came in, letting him know that it was safe as well. Abby felt her stomach tighten with anticipation as soon as her ex-husband walked into the house. He looked much like he had 5 years ago, maybe a little leaner. He was no longer clean-shaven, a look Abby had always preferred. Instead, he had replaced it with a trimmed mustache and goatee. Missing as well was the gentle smile and warmth in his eyes. Now those eyes were cold and hard. This is a fool's errand, she thought to herself. It appeared Jeremiah was about to yell at them when he was interrupted. Maya, the little girl, yelled and threw herself at him. Without looking, he caught her and swung her around. Her squeal of delight brought a temporary smile to everyone. Jeremiah pulled her up into a big bear hug as she giggled. Abby felt a twinge of sadness as she remembered Jeremiah doing that same thing with Sarah when she was little. Imo, you little rascal. Go find your mama, he laughed as he put her down. She's outside with your papi and Robbie. The little girl skipped out the door, laughing as she went. Jeremiah turned and glared at them, his expression indicating that any joy had left with the little girl. What do y'all want? He asked coldly. Mr. Hawthorne, Mr. Horace began, we've come here with a proposal that I think you'll find quite beneficial. I remember you, Jeremiah said. You're King Henry's representative. Have you thrown any orphans or widows out on the street this month? I figured you might get some kind of bonus for that, since you've sold your soul to the devil. Mr. Hawthorne, I assure you. Stop right there, Jeremiah interrupted. Your assurances mean nothing. I trust a rattlesnake before I trust any of you. Be that as it may, sir, I believe we have a business proposal that will benefit everyone, Horace continued, unfazed by Jeremiah's hostility. Jeremiah's laugh was devoid of mirth. So King Henry finally found out he doesn't control the ranch. He found out about the livery stable in Leadville. Yes, we were all quite surprised, Horace admitted. I'll bet you were, Jeremiah retorted. My father might have been a little touched in the head when he returned from the war, but he could still smell a skunk. He got that bank in Leadville to loan him the money to partner with someone he knew from the war and buy that livery. He staked a majority share of our ranch against that loan. Each month, the profits would be split, with our share going to pay off that loan and still provide a stipend for Mama after he died. That way, she'd have a steady stream of money regardless of what happened to the ranch. He set it up in both mine and Mama's names since he knew I wouldn't run off and abandon her. Jeremiah looked over at Thomas. He would have left it to both of us if you'd stayed around. I never wanted to stay on the ranch, Thomas stated. When you left, you broke both Mama's and Abby's hearts. I needed to leave and go out on my own. Of course, that didn't stop you from coming back and staking a claim on someone who wasn't yours. Ain't that right, dear brother? Gentlemen, please, Horace exclaimed. This isn't helpful. Who said I was trying to be helpful? Jeremiah barked. Mr. Hawthorne, I realize you were angry and feel wronged. I was wronged, Jeremiah emphasized. I was stabbed in the back by those I loved and trusted. Now why are you here? Please, Jeremiah, Abby blurted. Please hear us out. Like you heard me out? Jeremiah's eyes burned with resentment. Abby flushed before speaking gently. You're right. What happened the day you left was wrong. Things were bad and then got worse. I'm sorry for how we all seemed to attack you. You, Thomas, and I need to sit down and talk this through. There's a lot to be said from all of us. But first, you need to hear what Mr. Horace is proposing so we can lay all our cards on the table. Please, Jeremiah, just hear him out. All right, Jeremiah growled, walking over to a chair. Let's get this over with. Sitting down, he watched as everyone found a place to sit. You mouthpiece, he said, continuing to look at Mr. Horace. How are you going to bribe me this time? Mr. Hawthorne, I am here to offer you several things in exchange for all or a portion of your holdings on the ranch, Horace began. Jeremiah shook his head and snorted. What do you think you have that I could possibly want now? To start, I have a significant amount of money here. Jeremiah sat there with no reaction. Plus, Horace continued, I have notes to several deeds in Thompsonville that could be used to back up any type of arrangement we might need to make. Go on, Jeremiah said shortly. Besides that, I have it on good authority that the incident with Pedro Mendez can be made to disappear forever. There will no longer be the threat of a warrant hanging over your head. Jeremiah sat back, looking thoughtful. Is that it? No. Besides clearing the air with your ex-wife and brother, Horace said, smiling, we have some information that might help you reunite with your daughter, Sarah. Really? Jeremiah said wearily. So why isn't she here? Unfortunately, she ran away. Ran away? Why did she run? She ran away, Thomas interjected, because she's always resented me for marrying Abby. Shows she was smart, Jeremiah retorted, glaring at his brother. Come yourself, sir, Horace said evenly. So where is she? We know where she is and that she is safe. We are very willing to share that information with you as soon as we conclude our business here. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace continued in a slightly condescending voice, it's obvious that you're not interested in returning to the valley. Why not sever any remaining ties to a place that holds no joy for you? Certainly, we can come to some type of agreement that both sides will find profitable. You're right about one thing, Jeremiah said, glaring at Thomas and Abby. I have no desire to ever go back to that valley. With Sarah no longer there, there's nobody there that I care about. Jeremiah, Abby said softly, I'm sorry for how we confronted you that day. Things were so twisted back then. I know I didn't do right by you in the way I handled things. Didn't do me right? That's a laugh, Jeremiah sneered. I'm thrown into the Denver City jail for a fight I didn't start. People I've never met lie about me and I spend 2 months locked up. When I finally get home, I find I've been tried and convicted without a chance to defend myself. To make matters worse, my wife was now with my brother. I always knew she had a fondness for Thomas, but I thought we were united in marriage. I never imagined she would betray me like this. Jeremiah's voice cracked slightly, his pain evident. Still don't believe me? He continued, shaking his head. I can't believe it's possible that I was railroaded and that King Henry was behind it. No, Abby whispered, trying to maintain some faith in her father. He wouldn't do that. I've heard that Pedro and Maria's testimonies are on record in Denver, Jeremiah said. They swore to a very different story than what they told you. Mr. Hawthorne, Horace started. Shut up, mouthpiece, Jeremiah interrupted. It's my turn. They told the Denver sheriff they were forced to lie to you. They claimed the Swede threatened them and then he shot Pedro to frame me. Liar, the Swede barked, starting to rise from his seat. He froze when he heard the sound of a gun being cocked. Everyone turned to see an imposing woman in the doorway aiming a shotgun at the Swede's chest. Sit back down, she commanded coldly, or I swear to God I'll end you right here. The Swede slowly eased back into his chair, glaring at Jeremiah. Don't believe me? Jeremiah flatly stated. Go to Denver and see for yourselves. Abby looked between Jeremiah and the Swede, her stomach twisting as she considered the unsettling possibility that she had been misled. Jeremiah wasn't finished. I have a couple of questions for you both, he said, directing his gaze at Abby and Thomas. Didn't you find it suspicious that my wayward brother would return so soon after I left? Abby remained silent as Thomas spoke. Henry sent me a telegram a few days after you disappeared, right after the Mendez visited. How did he know where to find you? I contacted him a few months earlier, Thomas replied innocently. Your father asked me to come home, hoping I could convince Jeremiah to pool our resources for a deal with the railway. I didn't plan to return until I heard about all the trouble Jeremiah was in. I'm sorry things turned out this way for you, Thomas added, but I didn't come back intending to take your place. By the time I got there, you had already disappeared and Abby was alone and in pain. I stayed for her. So Henry sent someone to find you before he sent that letter? Jeremiah asked calmly and Thomas nodded. Then how come he could find you, Thomas, after 10 years of prospecting and me after 5 years away, but couldn't find me sitting in a Denver jail for 2 months? Surely you both were looking for me, right? Surely Mr. Mouthpiece here contacted his office in Denver. It wouldn't have been too hard to ask someone in the sheriff's office about me, would it? Neither Abby nor Thomas could meet Jeremiah's gaze, their guilt evident. The truth is, Jeremiah continued, neither of you cared if I came back. I was already guilty, convicted without a trial. You both betrayed me, stabbing the person you claimed to love in the back. So you can take your apologies and keep them. Jeremiah stood in front of them, daring them to meet his eyes, his face contorted in pain, nostrils flaring as if preparing to charge. After a moment of awkward silence, he turned to Mr. Horace. Here's my answer, mouthpiece, Jeremiah said firmly. There's nothing you have that I want. I don't trust you enough to believe you really know where my daughter is, and there's not enough gold in these mountains to make me comply. Go back to your master and tell him it'll be a cold day in hell before he gets his hands on my family's ranch. As night fell, Jeremiah spoke again, his voice cold and final. I won't throw you out tonight, but I want you gone by morning. Abigail, you can stay in one of the rooms in the house. Zeb and Robbie will sleep here as well. These 3 can have the bunkhouse. Those weapons stay locked up until you leave. Understand? Most everyone nodded as Jeremiah moved to the door and called for Robbie, who came running up to the house. Robbie, I'll leave at dawn to meet up with Ambrose and the others. Please make sure my horse is ready. Sure thing, Jeremiah, Robbie replied. Jeremiah turned to the group. You've got a few minutes before Robbie turns the dogs loose for the night, so I wouldn't waste any more time here. I'm tired, so if you'll excuse me, I'm turning in. With that, the group slowly dispersed. Soon, everyone could hear the dogs barking as they watched over the place. Jeremiah mounted his horse as the sun began to rise, knowing that several spots in Taylor's Pass would still be in the dark. He needed to be careful. Some of the cliffs were steep. He looked over at Robbie and nodded, and Robbie returned the gesture with a grin. During the night, probably before I let the dogs out, Robbie said. Put the dogs up and keep your eyes open, Jeremiah instructed. Watch out for Ray and Lilo. Hope to see you all later today, if not tomorrow morning. Sure thing, Jeremiah, Robbie said. Jeremiah sighed as he rode out slowly. His skin crawled and his heart pounded, knowing that Horace, or more likely, King Henry, would not give up easily. What their next move would be troubled him. Yet things were now in motion, and stopping them would be like halting a landslide. As he rode, he smiled, hearing Robbie yelling at the dogs. If anyone had been sleeping, they certainly weren't now. He knew he'd have to be cautious. The trail ahead would be tricky. The sunlit parts of the road would be breathtakingly beautiful while those still in shadow could be treacherous. Taking a deep breath, he tried to clear his mind. Seeing Abby and Thomas again had reopened old wounds and past feelings of anger and bitterness threatened to resurface. Back at the Jenkins place, everyone gathered for breakfast. Ray was serving up biscuits and gravy to Lilo's delight. "Where's the Swede?" Abby asked. "Don't know. He slept in the barn last night," Thomas replied. "Yeah, his snoring sounds like a train, so he agreed to sleep out there. He's probably still out there." Abby turned, alarmed by the look in Desiree's eyes. She feared for Jeremiah. Jeremiah slowly rode his horse into a shaded gulch, his eyes adjusting when he heard the click of a gun hammer being cocked. He launched himself off his horse just as the gulch erupted with the sound of gunfire. The dogs barked, announcing someone's approach. Everyone began walking out onto the porch. Before heading out, Thomas retrieved the gun he had put away when they first arrived. By the time he got outside, they could all see a single horse with 2 riders approaching. Jeremiah and Zeb dismounted, and Jeremiah exchanged a few words with Robbie, who then rode off quickly back towards Taylor's Pass. As Jeremiah and Zeb walked towards them, Abby noticed the rage on her ex-husband's face, his hands still near his gun. She felt Thomas shift away from her. Without warning, Jeremiah drew his weapon and aimed it straight at Thomas. "If you reach for that, I swear I'll take you down, kin or not. Now throw that gun over on the porch real careful-like." He turned to Horace. "You'd better not be hiding anything under those fancy clothes." Zeb grinned, pulling out a long knife. Horace turned pale and raised his hands. "I seem to have overlooked it," he stammered. Zeb reached into Horace's coat pocket and pulled out a small pistol. "Mr. Hawthorne," Horace began, but Jeremiah interrupted. "You say that one more time and you're a dead man. Good thing you didn't try to draw that thing, or you'd be 6 feet under by now." "That scum tried to ambush me near Taylor's Pass," Jeremiah said, his tone harsh. "He snuck up on me, but Zeb here put him down. He's dead." Horace looked shaken. "Where's the body?" "At the bottom of an old abandoned mine shaft," Jeremiah replied with a smile. "Hope he's keeping the Tommyknocker company." "You sure he's dead?" Thomas questioned. "Sure as I'm standing here," Zeb grinned. "I blew a hole clean through his back." "You shot him in the back?" Thomas asked, aghast. "He was about to shoot your brother." "I shot first," Zeb retorted. Jeremiah turned to Abby, frowning. "Ray, search her. Make sure she isn't hiding anything." Abby gasped in surprise. "I would never, you can't believe that." Jeremiah remained silent, creating an awkward tension. "Take her inside, Ray," he commanded. After the 2 women left, Thomas cleared his throat. "Do you really think Abby is armed?" "What I think is that I don't trust any of you," Jeremiah shot back. "A pretty girl like Ray out here amongst all these wolves, both human and animal. I'd put her up against any of you." Almost on cue, both women re-emerged. "Nothing there," Desiree smirked. "At least nothing special." Abby felt her face flush as Zeb's laughter lightened the tension in the room. The next 2 hours were filled with accusations and denials. Abby and the others denied any prior knowledge, while Jeremiah called them liars. Eventually, both groups reached an exhausted impasse when they heard Robbie's voice shouting in the distance, announcing his return. Slowly, everyone began filing out of the house to greet the returning party. Abby was surprised to see Robbie leading a group consisting of 2 men and 2 teens, a thin boy and a girl. Even though the girl was dressed in typical male attire, Abby recognized her immediately. "Thank heaven she's safe," she sighed in relief. Then she thought of Tiffany. Of course she'd tell him her side and he'd believe her. Her eyes were drawn to the men as they dismounted. The older man had a grizzled beard and carried himself with an air of authority. He was obviously Ambrose, the leader of the group. Beside him was a large man. Buckman had been right. He wasn't quite as tall as the Swede, but he was just as muscular. The young lad named Sam dismounted, and Abby could see why Buckman had referred to him as a Molly. He had several delicate features that suggested he might have been a sickly youth. His clothing was baggy and ill-fitting, and his hairless face was mostly hidden by a large floppy hat. To her shock, he ran towards Jeremiah and launched himself into his arms. Even from where Abby stood, she could hear Sam's gentle sobs. "I thought you died," Sam stammered as Jeremiah comforted him. Afternoon, Ambrose's voice boomed, drawing everyone's attention. "My name is Ambrose, and this is Mr. Jacob," he said, pointing to his companion. "And of course, you already know Miss Sarah. She's told us quite a bit about you all. This is Sam," he chuckled. The group watched as Sam gave Jeremiah a warm kiss, leaving the entire Hawthorne party in silent amazement. "What's the matter, Mother?" Sarah smirked. "Nothing, I just didn't realize," Abby stammered as she turned to look at her daughter. "I mean, I know there aren't a lot of women up here. Sarah burst out laughing and pointed back at the couple. Look again, mother. Don't let the clothes fool you. Sam's head had fallen to the ground, revealing a long blonde braid that had been hidden beneath it. Let me introduce Sam, Sarah chuckled. Well, more like Samantha. She's Papa's fiancée. Fiancée? Abby repeated, stunned. Sarah nodded as the couple walked arm in arm over to the group. Abby was taken aback by the expression on Samantha's face. It looked like she had just smelled something unpleasant. I know why you're here, Samantha sneered. I also know one of you tried to kill my Jeremiah. I want you off my property. Your property? Thomas asked, but Sarah interjected with a smile. I should have introduced her better. Miss Samantha Jenkins Wilcox, this is my mother and her excuse for a husband. I want you gone by dark, Samantha stated firmly, turning to lead Jeremiah away. Girl's got a fair bit of sand, don't she? Ambrose chuckled. She dresses that way to avoid unwanted attention. You know, a mine owner's daughter wandering around the woods can be a bit strange, but it does make sense, doesn't it? But we haven't finished, Horace interjected. Jacob Ambrose growled menacingly, you'd best be gone by night. I'd heed that warning if I were you. His strong voice broke the tension. I'm sure there are many questions to discuss. However, a little time to cool down seems in order. I suggest you go back to the hotel. We'll clean up and then we can have dinner and talk afterward. Will that be all right with you? Zeb, do you think you could convince the widow Brown to prepare something for a large sit-down this evening? Ambrose continued. I figure she'd probably be able to do that, Zeb snorted. It's been a while since the hotel had a good-sized gathering like that. We'll make sure both of you are well compensated. With that, they all returned to the house, leaving Abby, Thomas, and Horace standing outside. Zeb told them he'd get the buckboard and take them back to town. They rode in silence for the entire trip. Once they arrived at the hotel, the trio met in one of the hotel rooms. Abby was the first to speak. Was it true? She asked Thomas. Were the things Jeremiah said true? What things? Thomas replied. The things Jeremiah said about the Mendezes, were they true? How would I know, Abigail? I wasn't even there when any of that happened. And we don't even know if what Jeremiah said was true or just gossip, Horace said calmly. Even if there's some truth to it, it happened 5 years ago. It's in the past, he added. It matters, Abby hissed, because if I was lied to, then I cheated Jeremiah before he cheated on me. My revenge wasn't justified because I cheated on him and slept with his brother. I'm sorry, Horace said calmly. I wasn't trying to say it didn't matter, only that it was something that happened years ago. It's not something that can be changed or taken back. I understand that, Mr. Horace, but it does change things in my mind. If it's true, then I need to question those who lied to me. I need to know if my father is involved. Jeremiah was right about one thing, though I didn't ask my father to try and find him. I was so angry and hurt. Abby, you can't blame yourself, Thomas started. Of course I can. I didn't believe him when he came back. So who else can I blame? Thomas, you didn't try to find him either. You're right, I didn't. I'd been gone for so long that I didn't know if Jeremiah was capable of doing those things or not. So instead, I tried to comfort and protect you. Abby turned and stared at the lawyer. Did my father know, Mr. Horace? What did you and my father know? That Jeremiah was in the Denver jail? Yes, Horace sighed. We learned that he was there. But you never told me. What was the point, Mrs. Hawthorne? The Mendezes had already spoken to you and the warrant for his arrest had already been delayed. Honestly, ma'am, you were already sharing your life with Thomas. What could have come from us telling you that? I don't know, Abby stammered as tears began to stream down her face. Maybe it would have changed how I treated him when he did come home. Please, Mrs. Hawthorne. Knowing that wouldn't have changed the outcome of our confrontation with Jeremiah. Those things had already been done, Horace continued. Now we have to face the fact that there's little we can offer your ex-husband that will persuade him to sell any part of the ranch to Henry. Now we'll have to convince him to join us as a partner. Good luck with that, Thomas grumbled. He certainly hates us now. He thinks we sent the Swede to kill him. Yes, Horace sighed. I wish the Swede hadn't done that. I don't know what he was thinking. All three stood and stared at each other in silence as the Ambrose party arrived at the hotel just before sundown. Gone was the sensible protective clothing needed for hunting or fishing. In its place was finery that suggested Ambrose, Samantha, and even Jacob belonged mingling with Denver's high society. Sarah, Desiree, and Monique all wore the common dresses of the day, looking every bit the young ladies they were. Samantha walked in on the arm of Jeremiah, who still donned common attire but was clean. Samantha's transformation was startling. The effeminate, shy tomboy was replaced by an attractive young woman who showed no fear in looking anyone in the eye. She wore a stylish Victorian dress. And while Desiree and Abby were considered naturally pretty, Samantha's presence demanded everyone's attention. "Lordy, Miss Jenkins!" Zeb exclaimed. "Ain't you a sight? I haven't seen y'all dressed up like that since Mrs. Tabor's big shindig a couple years ago." "It's been a while, kind sir," Sam smiled and curtsied. "I haven't worn this since that night. It's been packed away, but tonight's a special occasion." "Oh, that's right. You'll be headed back to Leadville, and Jeremiah will be following you there soon after." "Yes, but we'll only be in Leadville until the wedding, then we'll be leaving for Denver." "Well, I'll be. So this is a real farewell night?" Sam nodded. "Then I figure I'll add to that. I'll be taking Desiree and Lilo back to Louisiana with me after Jeremiah leaves." "Really? I thought you might head up to Aspen," Ambrose interjected. "Nah, been doing this for too long," Zeb sighed. "Not the life I'd hoped to give Desiree, certainly not the kind I want for Lilo. Now come on in and get seated. This will probably be the hotel's last time to have its lobby filled with people and food." The Widow Brown outdid herself and made fried chicken with a mess of fixins. "She sure is special. Maybe she'd like Louisiana," Jeremiah grinned. Desiree burst out laughing and Zeb grinned wide. "Well," he said slowly, "I kind of already asked her. She's coming with us along with Robbie." Desiree laughed. "Yeah." Zeb groaned. "And all those darn dogs. We're going to look like settlers going the wrong way, going east to Louisiana instead of west." The Ambrose party laughed and congratulated him. Soon everyone was seated. The tension that hung over the gathering did little to keep them from enjoying a fine meal. Any serious discussion concerning the purpose of the Hawthorns' visit was tabled, and the conversation ranged from mining to weather to Denver. Upon completion, Ambrose produced 2 bottles of fine port. After everyone was served, he cleared his throat. "I believe we should get to the heart of this little get-together," he began. "First things first, we never got around to finishing the introductions. Jeremiah and Sarah have informed us of who you are, but I need to introduce myself. My name is Ambrose Wypra. Perhaps you've heard of my brother Robert Wypra? He was the treasurer for the Denver and Rio Grande Railway back when they had that little incident with Bat Masterson." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Ambrose addressed Abby directly, "I'm sure there is some doubt about the validity of the information Jeremiah shared with you yesterday. The Pinkertons I hired were very thorough. I know that the testimonies in question have been notarized and are being kept in a safe in Denver," Mr. Wypra stated. "Mr. Horace," he continued, his voice revealing a mix of amusement and condemnation, "we both know frontier courts are very suspect. Justice out here comes from a bag of coins or the barrel of a gun as much as through our legal system. These testimonies were taken to expose the lies surrounding Jeremiah," Ambrose continued. "As to whether they link your current employer, that is for each person to decide for themselves. Regardless, there is no warrant out for Jeremiah and any claims against him can be proven false." Ambrose leaned forward, his voice steady but commanding. "Now, Jeremiah has told all of us what you were asking of him. Unfortunately, I need to inform you that Jeremiah here can't give you what you want, even if he was so inclined, which he isn't," Sam interjected, much to the amusement of several at the table. "Sorry," she said sheepishly as Jeremiah reached over and took her hand. The loving smile he gave her was unmistakable. "Never apologize for defending your man, my dear," Ambrose chuckled. "You see," Ambrose continued, addressing everyone, "he can't give you what you want because he no longer owns that business or any of its holdings." "What?" Thomas and Horace blurted out together. "That's right," Jeremiah said, grinning. "I sold the livery back to my father's partner and paid back what was left of the loan. Then I sold my stake in the ranch as well. It no longer held anything but bad memories for me. So when a pretty young lady accepted my marriage proposal, I sold it. Everything is already signed and agreed upon and will begin the day after our wedding. The deal I made secured me a position with a bank over in Denver. It gives me a small stake in that bank, and I'll be working and learning the financial business under a mentor. I'm sure you all probably think that sounds boring, but because of that, I'll be able to secure a future for my wife and children." "But why?" Abby said softly, staring at Jeremiah. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" "Why would I?" Jeremiah growled. "You all ambushed me again. Then you give me some nonsense about how sorry you are and try to bribe me with my own daughter. Why would I trust any of you? I wasn't sure how far you'd go to get what you wanted. Since you brought the Swede, I figured I was in danger. But better me than my friends and loved ones. I knew Zeb would protect Desiree and Lilo. I also figured you all didn't know about Ambrose and Sam. I was pretty certain you didn't know about Sarah either. The simple truth is I would die before I ever let anyone harm either of my girls." Sam wrapped her arms around his and beamed. "Last night, I met with Zeb and told him if anything was to happen, it would involve the Swede. Turns out I was right. Zeb followed him and watched him get his rifle out of the wagon and then begin walking towards Taylor's Pass. When he tried to ambush me, Zeb put him down like the dog he was. Now I can focus on my future. I was happy back on the ranch. I had a wife and daughter that I loved, but one of them was taken from me and the other broke my heart. Some very kind people returned my daughter to me and an angel has healed my heart. I look forward to holding that angel every night. Someone returned Sarah to you? Abby asked, her voice trembling. Jeremiah nodded and looked over at Ambrose. When I ran away, I must have had angels watching over me, Sarah interjected. I wasn't sure where to go at first, she admitted. I'd heard you say that Papa had gone to Denver before he came back that day, so I went to Colorado Springs first. I was lucky to hitch up with a family going to Denver. When I arrived in Denver, I began asking questions at the city jail, then I went to one of the churches. A reverend and his wife took me in for a few days and then introduced me to Mr. Ambrose. Mr. Ambrose took me to Leadville to meet Sam. She took me in. They told everyone that I was her new handmaid, Sarah explained. Why? Abby asked, confused. Well, that was at my suggestion, actually, Ambrose explained. You see, I wasn't fully prepared at that time. Prepared for what? Horace asked. In truth, I wasn't prepared for this visit. I needed to make sure your man couldn't track Sarah to Jeremiah too quickly. There were still a few loose ends that demanded my attention. Thankfully, those were taken care of well before your man ever went to Ashcroft. We were able to smuggle Sarah here just a few days after she'd been discovered in Leadville. I've got another small confession, Ambrose grinned. It wasn't with the most honorable intentions that I delivered Sarah back to her father. I knew Jeremiah was a fair man, and I believed that my support would influence his decision to sell. What Jeremiah didn't mention was that he sold his interest to me and my partners. I'll be working closely with him since he has a good head for figures and should do quite well. The fact that he and his future bride have a vested interest in the bank is an added bonus. My decision wasn't merely a favor to John Jenkins. I genuinely care for Henry Thompson's daughter, whom I see as family. While the placer mines around Pikes Peak may have been extensively worked, there's a good chance that the source of the gold remains undiscovered. Eventually, someone will likely uncover it, making that valley extremely valuable. Owning the majority interest in the Hawthorne Ranch gives me a foothold there. Mr. Wypra, Horace began cautiously, I understand your caution, but Henry Thompson owns most of that valley. That's true, Ambrose agreed, yet I bought Jeremiah's stake not only as an investment, but also to settle a personal score. My wife's cousin lives in Kansas City, and we aren't particularly close to that side of the family. We only learned about this cousin's troubles a few years ago. She married a good man who, unfortunately, found himself caught in the middle of a railway war, facing intimidation and threats. I was shocked to discover that the same man involved in my wife's cousin's misfortunes had been purchasing land and businesses in the area. It was fortunate to learn he had severely overextended himself financially. After some effort, I managed to buy up all his debts, preparing to take most of his assets, except for his ranch, when the time comes. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some unforeseen incidents on that ranch before winter, Ambrose warned. Mr. Horace, please inform your employer that anyone involved with him may be in danger once these matters unfold. Denver isn't particularly safe either, even for lawyers. As the weight of Ambrose's words hung in the air, he moved on. Now that that's settled, would anyone care to join me for a cigar? Zeb, emerging from the kitchen, replied enthusiastically, absolutely. I'll help clean up here first, then I'm in. Desiree laughed and assured him that she and Sarah would assist. Meanwhile, Jeremiah and Sam quietly excused themselves for a stroll outside. Abby lingered for a moment, contemplating her next move. She knew she needed to speak with Jeremiah and apologize, despite the potential tension it might cause with Sam. As she approached, she caught snippets of their conversation. I'm sorry, Jeremiah. I don't want to be a bother, she heard Sam say. You're not a bother, Jeremiah reassured her. It's just that I get anxious sometimes. I know what people say about me, that a man would only be after my money to be with someone like me. They think I'm spoiled and that I drove my husband to his grave. But you know that's not true, don't you? Jeremiah chuckled softly. Yes, I know that isn't the whole truth. Though maybe there's a hint of truth to the spoiled part. Sam managed a small laugh. I'm getting better. I was just so angry when James left me to work in the mountains. We hadn't even been married 2 years when I lost him to pneumonia. I fell apart. I know many people thought I'd gone crazy, but it was just the pain. The realization that the wonderful life I had planned for us was gone. I remember going to Mrs. Tabor's big party, kicking and screaming, but I was glad Daddy insisted I be there. It wasn't until later that I learned he wanted me to meet someone he held in high regard. It was you, Jeremiah Hawthorne. When I first met you, I felt ashamed. I wanted you to like me so badly that it scared me. I hadn't felt that way since James. When you took me into your arms for the first time we danced, I almost cried. It was the first time I dared to hope for happiness again. But then I started reflecting on myself and the kind of person I had become. I swore to God right then that if you gave me a chance, I would become the kind of woman you'd be proud to marry. Samantha, I've always been proud to be with you even when you dress like a man, Jeremiah said, making Sam laugh and playfully slap his arm. I was honored to be near you, he continued, his voice growing somber. Sam, I love you even when I act like a spoiled brat sometimes, even when I let my temper get the better of me. I love you no matter what. Samantha Jenkins Wilcox, you tell me how I changed your life, but you changed mine even more. You know how broken I was when you met me. What they did to me nearly killed me. I know, sweetheart, Sam said, her voice filled with emotion. That's why I'm so angry with them. How could they do that to someone they claim to love? I'm sorry if I let my claws come out a bit, Jeremiah said softly. Well, no one can say they don't understand how you feel, Sam replied. I'm really sorry. I'm trying. Hush, beautiful. It's okay, Jeremiah said gently. It feels good to have someone love you enough to fight for you. Jeremiah's words struck deep into Abby's heart. She tried but couldn't completely suppress her emotions. Who's there? Sam asked, her voice shaky. I'm sorry, Abby said, stepping forward. I just wanted to apologize to both of you. Samantha, I'm sorry our visit caused Jeremiah's life to be threatened. That was never my intention, and I'll be asking Daddy about it when I get home. I'll also be asking him about the Mendez family and Old Man Wilson. I just can't believe Daddy was behind this. But I promise you, Jeremiah, I will ask. I just can't believe Daddy is as bad as you think he is. Maybe not evil, Jeremiah snorted. Maybe he's just a damn carpetbagger feeding on the misfortunes of others. Either way, I'm sure he'll someday regret his actions. Whether you believe it or not, it could cost you dearly when his chickens come home to roost. Do you really think that, Ambrose? Surely he wouldn't. Yes, I believe he'll do exactly what he said he would, Jeremiah said. Ambrose is a good man, but he has a dark side too. If the Swede was involved in what happened to Old Man Wilson and Ambrose's kin, then I have no doubt Ambrose will do just what he said. Abby, I don't hate you anymore, so I hope you don't get hurt, but I won't shed a tear if something bad happens to your father or Thomas. I know you don't want to believe it, but they took away all the good things in my life. Thomas took away my wife and daughter, and King Henry attempted to take away our family ranch. I hope they both meet their fate in hell. I can understand that feeling, Abby said softly, her voice breaking. But for the way I treated you and for betraying you with Thomas, I am truly sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, and I doubt we'll ever see each other again. I just wanted you to know. Hopefully, you'll ask Sarah to visit me someday, though it seems unlikely as long as Thomas and your father are around. I doubt she'll ever come. Abby nodded, wiping away a tear. Goodbye, Jeremiah. She turned and walked back into the hotel, knowing her future held several long, difficult discussions with her father. She suspected she would likely never see her ex-husband again. St. Louis, Missouri, spring 1905. Abigail Hawthorne slowly entered the cottage. It had been a long winter, but spring brought hope. She prayed it would bring new life to her as well. It had been 19 years since they'd moved to St. Louis after returning from Ashcroft. She confronted her father about the situation. He revealed that he had secretly given the Swede a stake in the expected profits. Henry insisted that the Swede acted on his own when he threatened the Mendez family and again when he tried to harm Jeremiah. He swore he hadn't instigated any of those actions but confessed to taking advantage of them afterward. Abby wasn't completely convinced, but soon after their talk, several events unfolded that limited her options. First, Edmund Horace returned to Denver and, a week later, left town without a trace, only mentioning that he was going back east where things are more civilized. Then, Thomas gave up and sold the rest of the ranch to Ambrose. After that, he departed to pursue prospecting out west. Abby felt torn watching him leave again, knowing that with the ranch sold and everyone gone, her father was all she had left. She received a telegram from Thomas a couple of years later. It came from San Francisco and stated that they had found gold in the Klondike and that he was sailing for Alaska. She never heard from him again. Ambrose Wyper had kept his word. It had taken a little longer than expected, but by spring of 1886, her father had sold almost everything to cover his debts. He had managed to sell the ranch for a modest profit despite one of the barns burning down just before Christmas. With the remaining funds, they were able to buy this little cottage and a small store. Henry Thompson left Colorado a bitter man, becoming even more despondent in 1891 when a major gold strike occurred in the Cripple Creek and Victor areas. The railroad built a spur that ran through their old valley to service those areas. Ambrose Wypra and his investors became even wealthier. The past years had been difficult. At times, Abby and Henry worked the store until he became too ill. She eventually sold it to care for him. He passed away the previous December, and now she was alone. Although partially by her own choices over the years, she had several suitors but never felt she could abandon her father. Ironically, the suitors she fancied the most were often the ones her father disliked the most. Now, in her 50s, she found herself alone. She walked over to her bed and sat down. The stillness in the cottage was almost overwhelming. She reached over to a small, ornate box beside her bed, opening it to retrieve two items that were very precious to her, a letter and a telegram. She slowly unfolded the letter she had received the day before, which was in response to one she had sent a month earlier. As she began reading the words she already knew by heart, she felt a mix of emotions. Dearest Mother, I'm writing to fulfill a promise I made to someone very dear to me. He believes it will be good for me and those I love to express my thoughts and feelings and send them to you. He says whether you ever receive this letter or not, it will be healthy for me to write and share whatever I need to say. I won't tell you that I welcomed his request, but I suppose he knows what he's talking about since he's a doctor. I also know he cares for me deeply and is only looking out for my well-being. Truth be told, I would do almost anything for Dr. Harold Thornton, my husband. Now, I should get to the heart of the matter, Mother. I forgive you. I forgive you for not believing me and for not protecting me afterward. I won't claim to fully understand why you acted as you did. But if it brings you any peace, then you have my forgiveness. I hope you understand why I felt compelled to leave after I told you what Uncle Thomas did. None of you believed me. It felt just like what happened to Papa. None of you believed him either. I felt unprotected and needed to find someone who would look after me. It was a miracle that I found Papa so quickly, and an even bigger miracle that I met Harold a few years after Papa and Sam got married. I received a letter from Desiree a few months ago. She was the woman with the little girl you met at the Jenkins place near Ashcroft. She wrote that she and everyone were doing well and that she had remarried. Little Amo is growing up into quite a beauty, and she mentioned that Mo's already been protective of her with the local boys. Zeb and Widow Brown still aren't married, but they're always together and likely will be for the rest of their lives. Desiree's letter inspired Harold to suggest I write to you. As I mentioned before, I'm married now to a doctor, and you have two grandchildren, a boy, John Ambrose, and a girl, Samantha Desiree. We moved to Santa Fe about 10 years ago with Papa, Sam, and my half-sisters. Papa is the president of one of Ambrose's banks, and he and Sam have 3 lovely daughters. They can be a handful at times, but they are also sweet and funny. Each one of them thinks they have Papa wrapped around their little fingers. It's amusing to watch them pout when Sam shoos them away to sit in Papa's lap. I asked him once if he ever got tired of all the commotion with 4 girls in the house. He just smiled and hugged me, saying he had missed 5 years of being with me. So this was heaven. He said he couldn't ask for more, a loving wife, wonderful daughters, and a grandson and granddaughter who mean the world to him. We have good homes, food on the table, and we are in good health. We even have a doctor in the family. Truly, we are very blessed. Before I end, I want to extend an invitation for you to visit us. I can't say Grandpa or Uncle Thomas will ever be welcome, but you are. Even Sam said she would behave if you came. She has changed so much over the years. She's much happier now, which she attributes to Papa. While I believe that's true, she absolutely dotes on her 3 girls. I need to conclude this letter now. I've honored my husband's wishes by writing this letter, and I think I'll soon be working on another of his wishes. Harold has been hinting about us having another child. If you ever decide to come, just telegraph your arrival date and we'll pick you up at the station. Best wishes from your daughter, Sarah. Abby wiped away her tears, refolded the worn letter, and placed it back in the box. Slowly, she unfolded the telegram. She had waited until after Henry had passed and the cottage was taken care of before responding. She had reached out to Sarah asking if the offer to visit was still good. The previous day, Sarah had responded, looking forward to seeing her and saying that the grandkids were excited. Abby didn't know how things would eventually turn out, but she knew she had to try. Even if she only got to see her grandchildren once, it would be worth it. She bought a train ticket to Santa Fe and telegraphed back her arrival time within a day of receiving Sarah's response. It was spring, a time of new beginnings. As Abby prepared to leave, she stood on the threshold of her cottage and took one last look around. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. She prayed that the journey ahead would bring healing, reconciliation, and perhaps a chance to reclaim some of the love she had lost. As the train whistle sounded in the distance, Abby stepped forward, determined to meet whatever awaited her with an open heart. She knew she was finally ready for this long-overdue reunion, a second chance at family even after all the heartbreak. And with that, she made her way to the station, leaving behind the pain of the past and stepping toward an uncertain but hopeful future.